Lecture 9, Advanced Formatting. So in this lecture, we're going to talk about how to take incredibly long and complex documents and make them cooperate, make them do what we want them to do. And so this involves a lot of tools that are very useful for students, undergraduates, and graduates. So maybe you're not making super long documents now, but grad school might be in your future. For professionals, for researchers, just things like tables of contents and list of figures. And honestly, when I was putting this together, I had kind of like flashback trauma to my PhD. So again, a 300 something page document. All of these tools, I could not have done it without them. So they're very important. You might not use them as regularly as some of the other things we've discussed so far, but they are essential to being able to put together a quality long document. And so the learning objectives we're looking at are creating a table of contents using styles. So we talked about headings and stuff before. We're going to actually see them in action here. And then to look at documents and to assess them for their kind of adherence to accessibility guidelines. So, advanced formatting. These are things that really kind of maximize what you've already been doing. And so when I would think that you would use them often would be in research papers or lab reports. Maybe if you're putting together some sort of prospectus for work. Tables of contents probably would be the most common, but some of these others like cross-references I think can be very useful. So you might not be familiar with it yet, but hopefully you'll see how they could bring value to your work with Word and Docs later. And so there's a couple things that I want to make sure are very clear before we move forward. And so first is a lot of what I've talked about previously is kind of coming into play here. So the structure that I've repeated multiple times that you should have is going to facilitate your use of things like a table of contents. And so if you've been doing everything properly, maximizing the abilities of these programs so far, then you're going to be able to kind of employ these things today very, very quickly, very easily. And so that's because they are automating things. They are automating basic organizational tools. They will kind of allow you to edit documents and keep the table in order, right? So like page numbers, headings, all of those sorts of things will be able to just automatically correct if you've done everything properly so far. And then why all of this matters, like why we need tables of contents, is because the documents that you're producing need to actually present to somebody else, right? So you're not writing these really long papers just for yourself. I mean, maybe you are, but in most cases, you're going to be writing these papers to be shared with somebody else. So at least a professor probably, but maybe you're going to be looking at publishing something or you're going to be sharing it with colleagues. You're making a pitch at work. And so ensuring that your documents are actually, accessible. We'll talk about it in kind of an big picture capital A accessibility perspective, but also accessible to a user. Like they can actually navigate their way through what you're giving them. And so a table of contents is always going to be useful of that. A directory of visuals, so that's a list of figures or tables. So if you're presenting lots of data, that's going to be the way that somebody's going to be able to search through that long document and be able to find it and refer back to it. And so ideally, you're not including anything in any of your submissions that wouldn't be valuable. And so you want people to be able to find it. And so using these tools really makes that so much easier. And so I talked about capital A accessibility. This is a requirement. So this is just making sure that documents are actually readable by anybody. So there's a lot of people who will be using tools like screen readers, and the documents need to have certain formatting for the screen reader to read it properly. And then biggest point here probably is that Word and Google Docs really drastically differ in power. I mentioned before, Word can just handle more than Google Docs can, particularly when you get to longer files. If you have multiple tables, lots of figures, Word is just going to be able to handle that a lot better. So Google Docs can do most of what we're talking about today, but you want to kind of think ahead before you start committing to either one of them to see how long your document is going to be, how many tables you're going to have, how many figures you're going to have, and decide which one of those is going to be the better option for you. So first, with table of contents. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to manually create a table of contents, but I cannot imagine that would be fun. I did have to do it many eons ago when I was in elementary school and middle school. I remember doing it manually. Yeah, it wasn't great. And that was for probably like maybe 10-page things, right? So it wasn't that difficult to kind of track where something had moved. It was just annoying having to go back to the table and change a page number. In a longer document, you might not see immediately where something has gone on the page. And so if you don't have these automated tools updating that for you, you are just going to be incredibly miserable. So auto-generate your table of contents. Make sure that you're using those headings. So all of your different sections have the right kind of heading style set to it. And then in Word, you can just go to References, Table of Contents, and there will be a couple different style options you can choose from. Choose the one that looks best for you. You can set them to have a certain degree of headings. So I think 1, 2, 3 is pretty much the standard for a table of contents, but you could have it go to 4 or 5 if you wanted it to get really, really detailed. And then once the table's in there, you can right click on it and then select update. And so you can either update just the page numbers or you can update the entire table. So if you change the title for one of your sections, that heading will update in your table of contents just as it'll update when things get moved around to different pages. So once the table's in there, it's really, really easy to update, literally just one click. And then in Google Docs, you would go to Insert, Page Elements, and Table of Contents. Pretty much same idea there, just simple, more simple. The update is the same. In my experience, sometimes there can be a little bit more of a lag there. So again, this is where the length of the document will really impact the user experience if you're using it on Google Docs. This is just a screenshot of how you would get to those. And so you can see here examples of some of those different styles for the table of contents. Those you can select between them, and it doesn't matter, it doesn't connect back to the heading styles that you've chosen. Those are separate. So this is just like the format. And so it's more like, do you want a straight line across the page, or do you want to have a bunch of dots across the page, or maybe nothing? So it's really more of just like a visual preference for you. Yeah. So then kind of same deal for lists of tables, except Google Docs just can't do it right now. So you would have to do that manually. If you're going to have a list of tables or figures, do it in Word. Don't waste your time doing it manually in Docs. Probably it will be something that's added eventually. But for right now, go to Word and then make sure that you're inserting captions for any of your figures or your tables. The caption is what the program will read to create your table. So if you've been formatting all of your inclusions properly with your captions, then you would go to References, Insert Table of Figures. And same thing, there's some stylistic choices that are just kind of preferences. But essentially it'll just spit out a table as the tables of contents would. And then we have cross-references. And so this is one that I wouldn't be surprised if many of you have not used previously. And it's basically putting a link in your paper. So a link to somewhere else in the paper, not like embedding something from the outside, or like you'll have links in your references a lot. It's not an external one, but it's linking to a different section within. So again, this is something that's much more useful in a longer paper. You will probably have seen it maybe in like research articles that you've read before. There will be references to something else. It's kind of the same idea. And you can link to headings, figures, tables, or page numbers. And again, this can automatically update. So if you say refer to this on page this, if that page changes, it will automatically update. And it is a standard feature in Word. You can do it in Google Docs, but it requires an add-on and just gets a little bit more complicated. So this is another one where I would say just stick to Word. So it's a couple images here to kind of demonstrate how you would add it and then what it would look like. So you would go to Insert and Cross-Reference, and here you have a little pop-up that shows all of your different sections. And so you'd pick which section you want and then basically format it into your paper in parentheses like you see here. So this says see who are in sync. So it refers back to a previous section. And then we have paragraph options. So This section we've kind of already been near when we were looking at hanging indents, but another piece of that kind of formatting is your paragraph options. And so this really just makes it look nicer. It's about the presentation of the material. And so there's several different options there. You can see there's 4 on the screen. And so widow and orphan control, not probably the most well-named tool that we have, but widow or orphan control prevents the first line, which will be the orphan, or the last line, which is the widow, from being alone. So if you have a paragraph running, but then there's like space for one line left on the page, it would leave that one line and then go to the next. And sometimes that can just kind of throw things off. So visually, it's not that great, but also for the reader, when you're thinking about like maintaining somebody's attention, sometimes a break like that can be a little sudden and somebody might not take in that full line. This would allow you to keep it all together. So it just kind of presents a little bit nicer. Keep with next prevents headings from dangling. Keep lines together prevents single lines from splitting across different pages. And then page break before is forcing a new paragraph to be on the next page. So lots of different options there. These can sometimes be useful. A lot of times people like put in a manual space to kind of correct a lot of these problems. And so using these options helps to make it a little bit cleaner. So you might put it in that manual space, but then you don't need the manual space because you've added later, and then you just have a weird random space in the middle of your paper. So if instead of doing that, you use these, it'll just stay neater throughout. And then accessibility. So I did talk about that, capital A, accessibility. Word has a checker. So it will actually like look through your document and flag issues for you. So any kind of document that you have, you should really be attentive to its accessibility. Definitely when you're in a workspace, a professional space, this should be something that you're constantly thinking about. Businesses can get in trouble if they're using documents or sharing documents that aren't accessible, right? So when you're submitting a paper to a professor, not as big of a deal, but it's good to kind of get into the habit of it now. So when you're out and doing it with actual potential consequences, it's not going to be something completely new and challenging for you. And so this is another one where Word, not Google Docs. There's some add-ons or extensions that you can add to Docs that will make it a little bit better, but I haven't really seen anything that's great. And again, this is something that will probably update in time, that they will probably add one. But for now, I would say stick to Word. And so it's in the review panel, the ribbon at the top, and you just click check accessibility, and it will identify things like missing alt text in your images. It will identify if there's low contrast, right? So if like the background and the text, there's too much similarity for it to be readable, improper order, issues with table structures. And so this is what it actually looks like. So when you click on that check accessibility, it pops up with this little panel. And so it'll show you the issues in all of these different areas. So it will kind of guide you in addressing them. And they will still show as errors until they are corrected. So it's nice too, if you're not completely sure how to solve the problem, you can kind of try it out a little bit and it will tell you if you've addressed it or not. And so the key takeaway is basically just this, hopefully, has helped you see how to work smarter, not harder, use all of these things that we've been talking about in previous lectures to have nice, professional, kind of polished presentation pieces that you get to add into the final document. So using that table of contents, table of figures, and then ensuring your documents are accessible at all times without having to do all of this work manually and take so much extra time.